And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Another edition of the Toronto Till I Die podcast, the Toronto FC fan show. And it's been a minute, but the news did not stop flowing in. So we've got a ton to get to. On this week's show, we're going to recap, unfortunately, TFC's 3-2 loss to rival CF Montréal last night. We're going to get into the Sebastian Giovinco stuff because that obviously set Twitter aflight, and TFC fans absolutely jumped all over this one, whether you agreed or disagreed. But we're going to get all into that stuff. And, you know, I've seen this narrative going around on social media. So I do want to discuss whether or not, you know, anything is really salvageable the rest of the season, the rest of the year. You know, we have 9 games left for Toronto FC. What is there to play for? So we'll get into that. And then, of course, we'll get into this week's burning question presented by our friends at Nesker. And I have to say it's a pretty good one. Thanks to our friend Josh Cloak, as he just a couple hours before this show is recording live here on YouTube. Our friend Josh Cloak reporting another bomb that John Herdman is currently the favorite right now to be appointed the next Toronto FC manager. That is, set some shiver down some spines throughout TFC Live. So yeah, we'll get all into that too. But before we do, obviously no Mike Newell this week. That's why you're hearing my lovely voice as taking over the hosting duties right now. He's off enjoying a few beverages at the cottage, so we do wish him well. I know he's going to be listening back to this. He will be back next week. So for now, it's just me and my guy here, Jeffrey P. Nesker. Jeff is back from his little hiatus, his little trip. Jeff, how was Portugal, man? And how was visiting Benfica?
Cheers. I'm having some beverages of my own. My new favorite tipple. Mikey, it was insane. It was insane. I mean, there's 2 clubs in the world that I think have it really figured out, and Benfica is one of them. And I would say Ajax is the other with respect to how to run a club where you're developing internally to great profit and just making it work. And then just seeing a club that's that old and that pervasive in the city consciousness, in the national consciousness, just how ingrained it is, how much of a lifestyle it is there. And it's difficult to compare. I mean, not that we didn't try, but, TFC is a much younger club. And there's been quite a few, it's different strokes, but hopefully TFC can get to the place where Benfica is at now.
It's cool because, you mentioned that, because Benfica is a team that, as we see every transfer window, they sell a lot of big players. The first 2 that come to mind most recently, Gonzalo Ramos, and going to PSG for, I think it was something like 70 million pounds, maybe a bit more than that. And also Enzo Fernandez going to Chelsea for I think 120, 130 million. But yet, year in, year out, domestically, they find ways to compete and win titles. And as you mentioned, maybe that's kind of a blueprint that TFC want to get to here, especially when you hear some of Jason Hernandez, some of his vision in terms of what he wants to get the club to, referring to LAFC and how they sell some players every window and still make money to kind of reinvest it into their team. That seems to be the new way of Major League Soccer. But obviously big differences in the culture, big differences.
I mean, it was just endless surprises. The way they they embrace their women's team. I mean, it's the first thing you see when you go into the Benfica Museum is a huge display of the women's team and all of their accomplishments. And we mentioned Chloe Leclasse, and immediately our tour guide started tearing up because they love her there. And proud of her move to Arsenal, obviously, but and then you see Angel Di Maria coming back for a hometown rate to play again with Benfica. So, the club's able to do some real business. And It's pretty wild. I'm no expert yet, but I
you
hope to be one with all these
did
trips.
you call him Angel Di Maria?
Angel. Sorry. He's an angel to me.
He's an angel to a lot of people. What a player. Yeah, so before we get into last night's match, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of want to break down here and just talk about, because it has been a while since Toronto FC played a game. They did get one. They did get 90 minutes in last night, an eventful affair. But before we do, just some talking points, two pressing items on our agenda that I want to get out of the way. The first one being Lionel Messi and Inter Miami winning the League's Cup. It was a special journey. Obviously, Lionel Messi is the one that everybody's going to talk about. His 10 goals in 7 games, quite frankly, putting that team on his back, taking a last place Inter Miami team and propelling them all the way to the League's Cup. Jeff, were you surprised by the outcome? Because thinking back to the start of League's Cup, I don't think everyone envisioned this fairy tale kind of playing out, but I don't know if anyone actually thought it was going to be possible with Inter Miami around Messi, and just because of the quality players they have sort of around Messi.
I mean, I love how the narrative is changing from Inter Miami's roster was garbage before Messi came to now. You've got Robert Taylor, Finnish international, et cetera, ad infinitum. I heard it best expressed in, it feels inevitable because he makes it look so easy, and you can look at the goal he scored in the final as a microcosm. I mean, that's my favorite kind of Messi goal. I'm a little biased because it's very similar to the one that I saw him score live at Camp Nou against Getafe, but to get around what was a really well set up defensive and Nashville team and find that space and then get off a shot with that much venom. I mean, he's an alien. It's otherworldly. It's insane. And there's a tweet that's going around. I just retweeted it. It's from Football Out of Context, and they're following Messi from his last touch to before that goal. The man's just walking around, like completely just walking the pitch. Look, like for all the world, totally disinterested. Sees his opportunity, gets into a full speed, and then he's there and does that. Like it's mental. It's absolutely mental. But this idea that he's making MLS look bad is just so naive. He's been taking Soul since he was 11 years old, right? He's done this to La Liga. He's done this to a lesser degree at Ligue 1. He does this. This is what he does. I mean, it's not, certainly we can all agree the quality of MLS isn't up to par with La Liga when Messi was destroying it, but that doesn't, I mean, you can't, he's a force multiplier. He just is, like, he's in a class unto himself. But and then I also don't like this narrative where it's like last place Inter Miami winning League's Cup. Well, they didn't start League's Cup in last place. They weren't penalized. They didn't get any kind of. They didn't have to start at a disadvantage because of their performance in the league. So they had just as well a chance to win as anybody else. You know what I mean? It just makes better copy. But we're in sure. messy league soccer. So that stuff's going to happen all the time now.
Oh yeah, I'm pushing that narrative for sure. And I think just one last thought on League's Cup as a whole, actually turned out to be quite an entertaining tournament overall. But that being said, I don't think that would have been the case if it wasn't for Lionel Messi. I think that was such a big part of why the tournament, in my opinion, ended up being a success. That final was electric, and one of the main reasons why most people are turning in again is to see whether or not Lionel Messi can kind of, figure it out and finish it off and really put a bow on what was an incredible run so far. And it's just his debut for Inter Miami. And then me personally, it was also really cool seeing, Lucas McNaughton and Jacob Schaffelberg play such important roles for Nashville over this journey. But had it not been for, Messi, me personally, I wouldn't have been as invested in the tournament because Toronto obviously wasn't there. None of the Canadian teams really made a run. And quite frankly, like I said, if it wasn't for Messi, I don't know. I don't know if I would have watched.
Because out of spite and also, more MLS adjacent soccer right now is bad for our souls because of this woeful campaign that we've had to suffer through. But, Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I hate these takes. I mean, I dragged somebody who was saying, Nashville's run, even before the final, is the greatest performance from an MLS team against Liga MX opponents. It's the same old, right? Like, they didn't have to play them at hostile venues in Mexico, That's a huge asterisk. So if we're going to do this again, and I think we are, let's open it up and do some matches in
Some games in
non-US stadiums
Mexico.
as quickly as possible. Yeah, as quickly
Yeah,
as
that'd be
possible,
cool.
because that is such a cop out. I mean, those stadiums are horrifically hostile, and they are like the 12th man out there. It needs to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Next order of business that I just want to just get out of the way. This kind of leads into last night. It's C&E games at BMO Field.
Mm.
You weren't there last night. I actually did go. I attended as a fan. Not often I get to do that, but and I've said this on this podcast before. I do split seasons with a few people, so I do have a couple of games that I try and get out to just to give myself a bit of a different experience. I was fortunate enough to take the girlfriend and two other friends also to the game. They don't get to a lot of games, so just to experience that. And I just want to get your thoughts on. I know you've been in the past. I know you weren't there last time, but do you like the C&E games? Because I
Well, I
personally,
mean,
I love it.
yeah. Did you show up
Go
early?
ahead.
Did you do the CNE beforehand, or did you just go to the game and then a little bit afterward?
Both. So we showed up maybe around
Okay.
6 p.m. Yeah, like when you show up around then, you can't really experience too much because
No,
there's
no.
obviously a lot of people. You want to get to your seats, ensure you don't really miss much of the game. But you still, you gotta go down, chow down on like a deep fries Mars bar, get some food, have a drink. It was still,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a nice time, and I think it's incredible, just aesthetically when nighttime falls and you have like it was a great
Mm-hmm.
sunset last night. And then you
Unbelievable.
have
Yeah.
the bright lights of the CNE all around you with the different rides and stuff like that. That's an interesting vibe. I've spoke
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of people who don't like it because it just causes such a fuss and such a mess. But I wonder what your thoughts are.
Well, it's funny because my wife actually said this, so I'll give her I'll give her her hat tip. But she was like, "It's worth it when you go and you do the CNE, right?
Mhm.
And you make a day out of it. It's worth it because of that added value. You don't have to worry about, are we going to the CNE this year, because you have at least two opportunities to do it when you're a season seat holder, right? As long as you accept that it's going to be chaos and you open your mind to the fact that it's going to be absolute chaos, which is way easier said than done. I think it's good times. But I can agree with people that aren't happy, don't see it as added values and see it as a detriment. If you're just going to go to the game, it's a cluster F, right? Like,
Mhm.
every year that there's a CNE game, gate one has different permutations. It's like they can never remember how they set it up last year. So the queues are always in weird, different directions. Security is always a mess. You have people, playing dumb at the gate. Like, well, why can't I bring this churro and all of these, tagging this time, right? Like, even though it's clearly marked on the ticket. So it's an exercise in frustration, but you have to know that it is, of course it is.
That's the one thing I wish that they would allow. Even if they just
mm,
make the exception for CNEs bringing in like food items to TFC games, different sport, maybe different business model as well. For Jays games, a lot of people don't know you can actually do that. You can bring in
yeah,
outside
yeah.
food into Blue Jays games. Obviously, you can't bring in any alcohol and stuff like that, but you can bring in your own. You can go grab a pizza and walk into the Rogers Center with a full-on pizza. So I do wish that you
Hmm.
could kind of, because obviously one of the CNE's greatest attractions is just the different types of food that they have, and having the
Absolutely.
ability to bring that into the stadium would be pretty cool. But obviously, like I said, I understand the business side of things as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, I like the fact that it created a bit of a different vibe down during a special, summer night, a derby night against CF
Hmm.
Montreal. It didn't end up being as special for Toronto FC, who came out on the losing end of things here. So yeah, let's just
Mm,
let's just dive into kind of last night, and I would just want to start off
sure.
before we get further in. Let's talk about the starting 11 here. Notably, Michael Bradley, making his return to the 11 after missing the last 20 matches with a hamstring injury. Prince Owosu makes his Toronto FC debut. He started as the lone striker last night. You had Mabika and you had Shane O'Neill in over Sigurd Rosted, which I thought was a pretty interesting decision by Terry Dunfield to revert back to kind of what Bob Bradley was doing there before. And then the one that, ended up catching a lot of people's eyes was Brandon Cervania at right back over Kobe Franklin.
That was a big one.
Yeah, just what are your thoughts on the 11? I guess let's start with that Cervania and at right back over Kobe Franklin. What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Let's never do it again. I don't think it applies to our friend of the show, Chris Fung's idea of getting the best players on the pitch, because he was garbage in that right back role. I mean, he's a midfielder. Let's never do that again. We have a capable right back, and he was sitting on the bench. I understand that. And this sort of rolls into what's left in the season. Maybe you want to see if you can find somebody on the squad that can deputize Kobe Franklin, because now you have no Richie Larea in the mix, sort of thing. And it's pretty obvious that our man Raul is not long for this TFC shirt if his performances continue in the same vein as that one. So I can sort of make an argument for why we were moving things around, and Cervania is certainly the closest thing we've got to that Nick DeLeon kind of Tsubasa Endo Swiss Army knife that's still on the roster. So why not try it out? But man alive, that didn't work. So let's never do that again. What was my other surprise? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, no, it was interesting because we have seen Cervania at right back before. I think the last game before the break, he came on as a substitute and shifted over to right back, and he ended up actually looking pretty solid, made some solid plays. So Terry Dunfield deciding to start Brandon Cervania right back. And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Kobe Franklin had such a great run at that right back position. And sure, maybe his form dipped a little bit, but you're coming off a 3-week break. Brandon Cervania's future is not as a right back. He's a central midfielder. At times you can shift him out to the right if you need some cover. If you're playing in maybe a diamond, you can play that right center midfield role. He's not a right back. So yeah, the decision to start him over Kobe, a bit of a head scratcher. And I think as soon as Kobe Franklin came on, you could see a bit of a difference down that right-hand side. TFC were finding more ways to move the ball forward. Obviously, Kobe Franklin's pace as well, evident in a couple situations, even defensively, covering back, tracking back. Take the reins off Kobe Franklin at this point. He is hands down this team's best right back right now. So you got to continue to, I think, just give him the keys there at right back, and let's see what happens here. Michael Bradley, I see Keith Sweat here just in the chat saying, why did he get subbed off? Did he get injured? No, I think it was more so the fact that Michael Bradley hasn't played in months. Since I think April, it's been since Michael Bradley played. So I think it was more so just kind of easing him back into the mix. Jeff, what'd you make of the skipper's performance?
He looked like he hasn't played in a bunch of months. I mean, he was rusty. He got beat for pace. He wasn't doing a whole lot of the Michael Bradley things. I think it's unfair to assign any kind of real grade over his first half performance because the team on the whole was just flailing limbs and a mess. Taking the task because he didn't set the tempo, but I think it was unfair to expect Michael Bradley things on his first game back after such a long injury. And it was clear he wasn't going to do all 90 minutes. So it wasn't a surprise to me that he was one of the subs. We have a lot of capable midfielders now. And not only that, but my man, Victor Vasquez is back in the mix. So, Michael Bradley wasn't going to get that 90 for various reasons, and I'm not surprised that he didn't.
Yeah, I thought initially he came out and sprayed a couple of nice balls out wide to Bernardeschi. We know this about Michael Bradley. When he has time on the ball, he has the ability to get us set up and pick a really nice pass. So I thought we saw a little bit of that early on. What I didn't actually like, and this isn't necessarily Michael Bradley's fault, but I didn't like how Terry Dunfield played him in a single pivot, because you have Franco Ibarra there, who has shown that he is more than a capable six. When he was playing in that single pivot as a six,
Yep.
sometimes as a double pivot, he looked really good there. So instead, though, they shifted Ibarra to more of an eight alongside Osorio with Michael Bradley as the single pivot. And I just don't. I think it affected Ibarra negatively. And I think when you have Bryce Duke and was it Opoku, I think is his name.
Yeah, it was a Poku.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so when you have those two players who kind of playing like a free roam 10ish kind of position for Montreal, 8ish position, it's more of it creates more of an issue for Michael Bradley as the lone holding midfielder in front of Mabika and O'Neill. So when you have, Ibarra as a six, I would love to have seen them playing in a double pivot there just to provide more
I
cover in
agree.
front of that back line and also just give them more avenues to kind of build up and deploy possession there. So I think, yeah, that wasn't my favorite kind of takeaway. And, a lot of people around TFC are sharing the sentiment that Michael Bradley, he was supposed to come in and fix everything. I mean, that hasn't been Michael Bradley for the last couple of years. I don't think anybody is saying that Michael Bradley is the solution to this team, but when he's at his best, he is a guy that can get the best out of other players when the team around him is good as well. So yeah, we
Yep.
need to drop the fact that Michael Bradley is no longer TFC's engine in the midfield. He's still a guy that can very much control the game and get the best out of his teammates, but he needs to be put in the right situation. And right now, the way the club is, it's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
tough task for Michael Bradley these last 9 games. I think, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, you're dancing around the issue, and the chat is doing the same. But like, you know, Michael Bradley's decisions are entirely limited because if he's passing to say Berna to let the ball die at his feet, in an attempt to dribble 8,000 people, like, you're talking about a guy whose soccer IQ for, I'm going to get roasted for this, but he does have a pretty amazing soccer IQ. So
Mhm.
you could almost see him hesitating because he could see that it wasn't going to work. That his outlets weren't going to work and the team wasn't set up in a way that they could be a ball for a final ball to, someone in goal. So he was frustrated and him taking time on the ball made him look even slower by consequence. Right. So you saw his frustration quite manifest quite early and quite often. Ibarra too.
Mhm.
Ibarra was really frustrated out there. And I think that was because he didn't know what the hell to do. He's used to being more central. He's used to, like you said, being part of a pivot. And here we are throwing him out as a right midfielder, kind of, with almost nothing to do. And he's got Cervania behind him and Berna in front of him. And those are both kind of black holes in the first half. So, of course, he was getting frustrated. Like, I don't know if you caught, but the camera caught him having words with Bernadeschi. And it didn't look like it ended very well for either of them. So, yeah, it was disjointed and messy that first half for sure.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there. Like, not a lot going forward for TSC in that first half. They actually outpossessed Montreal, but I know I tweeted this out. It was really negative. Like, all the possession that
Mm-hmm.
TFC had was either in their own half or it was going out to the wings and kind of just resetting possession. They
Yeah.
lack that creativity in the midfield that other teams you see other teams use, and quite frankly, other teams have more of to
Yeah.
help break lines and just get more offensively out of this team. But speaking of that, Prince Owosu making his debut as this number 9, he played about 60-ish minutes. He was I do want to emphasize he was, I believe, ill the night before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a factor here when we do evaluate his performance. But just overall, your initial reaction to his
I
debut here.
mean, if he wasn't feeling well, it's not like we don't have a million other strikers, including new boy Cassius. Like, I don't understand putting him out there. Um, you know, this is what I noticed. It took him all of 4 minutes to develop the same body language as the rest of the squad, which is absolutely piss poor body language. Arms held aloft, praying to the soccer gods for better service. I found that disturbing. I found that disturbing in the extreme. His runs were ill timed. He wasn't getting a lot of looks. He made one turn in the box that was superb and really showed off his skills. The word's still out on him. Like you said, he wasn't feeling well. We can ask why he was given the start. but that's not the question. What I see looked positive. I thought Sapong coming in later in the game also looked really positive. So what do you know?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a little bit of a different approach. I really liked him. I really liked him as a player. I think Terry Dunfield was the one who said it after the match, and I kind of agreed with his overall assessment. Was that he was isolated a lot on his own, far too many times, so it was really tough to judge him off that performance. But what I really like is that you see a lot of really good starting points with this guy. First off, he's got the frame, right? He's a strong guy, and he's got a little bit of that edginess to him. You're saying you don't like the frustration that he's showing. I personally, out of my number 9, I like that. I think you'd lead a little bit of that nastiness out of a number 9. Just because when you're playing, especially when you're playing up there by yourself, you need to kind of be a little bit of a pain in the butt towards other teams' defenses. And you saw a little bit of that, sticking a foot in a little bit too late, not afraid to kind of jump into tackles. I like that. The other thing I liked is that, there were times where the ball got away from him, but he looks like he's a guy that you can play off, that what their team can play off. I would have loved to have seen Insigne, Bernardeschi, and Owusu all up top at once, because it looked to me that Owusu is the most sure striker that we have, that Toronto FC have on the ball. And his ability to kind of lay it off here and there, I think we're going to start to see more than that once he kind of gets into play. And the third thing I liked about his starting points here is, man, this guy's quick. He's faster than I thought he was. So you combine the speed with his frame, and I think his actual like touches, I did like what I saw. I want to see more out of him. I think without a doubt right now he is the best option Toronto obviously have at number 9, and might be the best option that this team could have in a while. But let's see how it plays out. Let's see how the rest of this year plays out. I want to see more out of him, but there were some good starting points out of him.
Yeah, I mean, his first touch is great. His second touch is garbage, which is a pretty good problem to have, right? I'd rather have your first touch be good and worry about your second touch, right? So yeah, like these are all things that reps will fix, and luckily he's going to get at least 9 reps, hopefully, because he'll probably start the balance of TFC's remaining games.
Yeah, I'm going to call it. I think he's going to be a striker that Toronto FC fans end up liking. That's my prediction. I know there's not much maybe to go off just based off last night, but there were a few moments, if you kind of like break his game down, that we saw him that we haven't really seen out of TFC strikers in a very long time. So yeah, let's see how that one plays out. Okay, let's move on and talk about kind of the moment the match changed. Obviously TFC going behind 2-0 in the first half. 2, in my opinion, really preventable goals.
100%.
The first goal they let, I think it was 04. No, it was, I'm blanking on the name, but anyway, they let one of Montreal strikers cut inside far too easily and get his shot off. It was a free
and then
kick.
Died and then watched it. Yeah,
it was a free kick at the top of Montreal's box. It was just one ball over the top, and then they kind of got exposed from that point on. And then, as you mentioned, Romero makes a save, ball hits the post, bounces back, and Matthew Chouanier beats every TFC player to the ball and into the empty net. So preventable goals. Second goal was even worse. It's just Thomas Romero kind of scuffing a goal kick, playing it right to Bryce Duke, who sets Montreal in. And again, it was they made no mistake. Yeah, Terce McGirt saying Vincent was the guy who looked really positive, by the way, for Montreal. Looks like a really good player. They have a couple of those guys that look like really good players. But game changes second half, right? You've kind of alluded to this from the chats that we've had since, that Terry Dunfield made some good decisions at halftime and motivated their team in a really good way at halftime, because we saw Kobe Franklin check into the game and we saw Alonso Coelho check into the game. The first substitution, Franklin coming in for Ibarra, Coelho coming in for Michael Bradley. Both guys, I think, showed really well throughout the course of the match. and they look like guys that actually came on and made a difference. But the biggest difference maker, I think we can all agree here, was Lorenzo Insigne coming off the bench.
100%.
I'm,
Wow.
I'm correct in saying the game completely changed when he came on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts?
I was concerned why he didn't start, because he never does, and he's making millions of dollars to not play for us. But oh my God, did he change the game? And I'd be remiss if I didn't also talk about my man VV getting garbage minutes that weren't garbage minutes, because he looked phenomenal out there in his brief cameo. Yeah, he's a baller. What can you say? It felt like Lorenzo spent his time on the bench looking at the game states in a way that only an elite player can. And then he came on and he had a laundry list of things he wanted to try, and all of his ideas were good ones. Everything that he did looked like he had kind of studied how Montreal were playing and had figured out what pockets he was going to operate in. And it was really nice to see. He looked engaged. He looked switched on, despite the shenanigans at the end of the game where he didn't look so good. But it was nice to see. He's, despite everything that I say about our DPs, let's remember the baseline is that they are skilled players. They're just, maybe not showing that well in MLS, but it was awful nice to see.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, he absolute difference maker. The second he came on, you can just see. I mean, it's not really a surprise to see the difference between a player like Lorenzo Insigne, a bona fide star left winger, versus a kid in Jaquil Marcherutti, who's still 19 years old, but not the same player going forward as a guy like Lorenzo Insigne. And it kind of makes you wonder over the stretch, maybe what could have been had Insigne and Bernardeschi been able to just stay healthy and stay in the lineup, or just stay available, I guess, for this Toronto FC team over this stretch with Terry Dunfield at the helm. Because I was looking back at it, even though they played together last night, they still haven't been on the field for 90 minutes during this Terry Dunfield era, the last 7 games, I believe it is, which to me was a bit surprising, maybe just because of the break. It's been so long, but seeing them kind of on the field together, really you see them lift the tempo and lift the players around them. So I do, back in my head, I do wonder what this stretch would have looked like had both of these guys been available from the get-go. And the reason being, we saw the first goal, Federico Bernardeschi ending that eternal goalless drought for Toronto FC. The streak actually ended at 685 minutes, the club's first goal since June 24th.
Oh my God!
First of all, what a beauty of a goal.
Oh my God, Berna, what did I call him? Berna banger. That's what it was.
Yeah,
both
that
of
was
his goals
that was
were
a
Berna
bona
bangers.
fide Berna banger for sure. It was in a way kind of fitting that he was the guy to kind of break this goalless streak here for TFC. Let's talk a little bit about Bernardeschi though, because you, Jeff, obviously have been very vocal about Bernardeschi and wanting him out of Toronto FC, and there is some absolute justification behind that. But just isolating sort of his performance yesterday, what did you make of it? And maybe more importantly, the goals aside, what did you make of his effort and his attitude, I guess, on the night?
I still have some concerns. One, I hate that they only look for each other. Berna could have put a cross into the mixer, but he hit it really wide to try and get at Lorenzo. Now, we've seen them score goals that way before. And again, small sample size. We're in small sample size hell because these guys almost never play together. And is it fair to expect them not to look for each other when they really haven't developed a chemistry beyond that? And their first habit is going to be to look for each other. I don't know. They were great goals. I hated his performance in the first half. I thought he was disinterested. It was the same old. I loved his performance in the second half. I thought he was in the right place at the right time, and you could obviously see the chemistry with the kind of players that TFC needs to be fielding the creative attacking midfielders. Victor Vasquez instrumental in getting that second goal going. So yeah, as far be it for me to give of the man his flowers, but he deserves them for those two beautiful golazos that he scored over the game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. First half, he struggled. He, like you said, gave the ball away a lot. Some of it may not have been necessarily his fault alone because you're playing on that right back side with Surveying. You're playing next to Ibarra there as well. You have a new striker in front of you in Prince Owosu. There's a lot of times they were kind of just off the same page. There were times where he did try to do too much, and instead of
100%.
I just pointed out the fact that they were being a bit too negative, but there were times where Bernardeschi could have reset the ball and try something different. But second half, he comes out and again, right away, you see a bit of a difference. There's a bit of a spark under him. And yeah, more than anything for me, it was his effort and his attitude that was just all extremely positive on the night. And I think over this 2-3 months stretch here, we do, especially us on the show, like we do forget just how much of a fan favorite what Bernardeschi was at the start of the season. And the reason being is because performances like this, where he came in and at times he was one of the only players that were absolutely working their tail off, both on and off the ball. He had a very positive attitude, with his teammates. He at times, he was interacting with the fans. There's one play on the sideline when it was in between plays, and he actually asked a fan for their water bottle and dumped it all over his head. And it made the fan. I don't know if anybody actually saw that, but it made the fans' night. It just he has that ability to form kind of special relationships with the fan base. But in order to do that, you got to put in shifts like this, and Bernardeschi absolutely did that. The one thing he's been lacking over this stretch, it's been about 18 games, I think, since he scored a goal, was his ability to strike the ball. Right? When he came in, when he first started with TFC, that was the one thing that everybody was mesmerized by, his ability to strike the ball. And over the stretch, there were other times where he had the chance or the opportunity to hit strikes like those, but ended up scuffing it. But last night, he connected on two absolute beauties. One, of course, with his left foot, the other one with his right foot. And those are strikes that only players like Federico Bernardeschi can hit.
100%.
So I got to give him, as much as we do like harp on him on the show, we got to give him absolute credit for his performance last night. And last thing I'll say is I do wonder, Jeff, how much of this has to do with this mentality, the effort that we saw last night. How much of it had to do with kind of the saga that's played out over these last month and a half. And we've talked about it on the show. What I can tell people is Federico Bernardeschi wanted, I'm sure he still wants, a move back to Italy. But unsurprisingly, their interest hasn't been there for Federico Bernardeschi, at least at the price tag that he was looking for. That move to Bologna, which is widely reported, they wanted TFC to eat a bunch of Bernardeschi's salary. There were other moves that Bernardeschi could have made away from Toronto, but he, for whatever reason, decided to turn those moves down. Or same situation, the teams wanted TFC to eat kind of a lot of the salary.
Too much, yeah.
I'll say this now. My understanding is that Bernardeschi wants either a move back to Italy, which does not look like it's going to happen unless something changes over this next couple of days, weeks, or he's going to stay in Toronto with TFC. Those are kind of the two places that he has it on his mind right now. So let's see how exactly this plays out. But like I said,
who cares if he's putting himself in the shop window by doing moments of individual brilliance for TFC on his way out? It's way better than vaping in a plane, so I'll take it, right? Like if it's not entirely on the level, if he's got a hidden agenda, which because of course he probably does, who cares? This is a better Fede than we've had for a while. So if that's how he gets his powers, then so be it. I'm not in any mood to argue for the contrary at this point.
And quite frankly, I don't. If he was vaping on planes, if he was vaping at the training center, if he was vaping anywhere, no one would care if he's putting in shifts like this. To be honest with you,
No, I mean Zlatan called a guy the wrong name and no one corrected him, right? Like, far be it for me to put them in the same vein, but yeah, winning is the ultimate equalizer, and performances are the ultimate forgiveness. So absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely, I feel you 100%.
Exactly. So with Bernardeschi, with Insigne flowing, you had Alonso Coelho connecting at the midfield. He formed a nice relationship with Brandon Cervena. As you mentioned, CJ Sapong came in as well. He gave a little bit of something, won some balls in the air at striker. So TFC had a lot of momentum, and that was the loudest I've heard BMO Field in in a very long time. You can even hear it coming through the Apple TV broadcast that I rewatched this morning. The commentators were talking about just how loud and how electric BMO Field was, especially after that first goal went in. So TFC had all the momentum. Lorenzo Insigne had a chance at the penalty spot. Obviously, he shot the ball over the net. And you kind of feel that, maybe there's a way TFC can kind of salvage something out of this game here. But in just one play, Ame Mabika gets turned by Opoku, goes the other way, and ends up being Raul Petretta taking down Lassi Lapalainen in the box, gets sent off for the red card, and BMO Field just deflates. A lot of people are pointing to Petretta for this moment, and I get it. It was a play that Raul Petretta probably shouldn't have made. But, man, Ame Mabika, what's happened to this guy? He looked like a completely different player under Bob Bradley. But since Terry Dunfield has come in, he's been in and out of the lineup, so maybe he's lacked a bit of that consistency. But there are times where his effort level doesn't look like it's quite where it was at a certain point. He looks less engaged, and I even thought, like, on the ball, there were some really careless giveaways by a guy who his first couple weeks, months here at TFC, he showed like he looked like a guy who was really good and really confident on the ball. What's happened with Ame Mabika?
Honestly, without getting into too big of a conspiracy theory, this is my problem with U.S. college soccer, because they play it like hockey. So you have endless subs. You don't have to play a full 90 minutes, right? And the extent of his minutes have been in U.S. college soccer, right? One, there's a reason why Inter Miami were willing to let him go. And as much as we loved him at first flush, there's a reason. Two, I feel a lot of his bad habits come from that not 90-minute thing. And I'm not sure why it hasn't been sort of coached out of him yet. But this is a young kid, and that he's in and out of games in a way that's obvious to anybody that pays attention, and that has to stop. I don't think it's a skill issue. I don't necessarily, like, he got turned around fine, but he left Petretta and Romeo on an island. That happens when you're a marauding center back, right? He's I think he's the heir apparent to the Chris Mavinga school of jump kicks on TFC's backline. So you're gonna expect some boneheaded brain farts sometimes from the aggressive center back in your choice pairing. That's just at least that my margins are a bit lower for boneheaded insanity from the aggressive center back in the two-man backline. But yeah, no, it's naivete. I think it's a really bad habit, and as much as I'd like to tie it to his university education, I'm just gonna simplify. It's a bad habit. It needs to stop. Right? He turns off. He's caught ball watching often, and there's a serious lack of effort that you don't want to see in your starting center back at all, ever. You always commit to the play, whether you've been found out or turned around or whatever. You don't give up on a play ever. As for Petretta, what was he doing? What was he thinking? I mean, trust your goalkeeper. What the hell was he doing? You have to have some trust that your goalkeeper is gonna either save it or force a low chance shot. That was insanity. Like it wasn't even a pick me moment, or like you know what it felt like. It felt like the second baseman was tracking back into outfield to catch a fly ball, not listening to the outfielder call for it, and then naturally just walks into the guy and the ball drops, right? Like he had no business being there. Like your keeper is on it, I didn't get it. It was such a lame, boneheaded move by him.
I don't think he was trying to commit the foul. I think he was trying to give Lapalainen a little bit of a nudge on the back just to throw him off balance as he goes to kick the ball. We've seen that's pretty common play in football, but he got him at the wrong time, and Lapalainen just goes over, rightfully so. But I don't think his intent was to necessarily just commit the foul and give them the penalty because he thinks it's a better play for TFC and a higher percentage play.
I mean, I should hope not.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to make it more difficult for Lapalainen to finish. So yeah, I get it. It's not a play you hindsight you're gonna make, but finding yourself in that position, never an easy one to find yourself in. And the only reason he did is because of the play Mabika did. So in my opinion, I think more people should be focusing more on that. Raul Petretta, listen, we know it. Like he's the highest paid left back in Major League Soccer right now. Hasn't lived up to that price tag. I still think he's a good left back, and I still think he is a starting caliber left back. But I do think at this point you have to say that he's overpaid. I get it. Like he hasn't shown too much going forward right now for TFC.
Zero.
But I think he's
absolute zero.
Yeah, I think he's a smart player though. Like he reads the game well, and you can tell just the quality of him versus some of the other players that they have on the pitch. Like he's still a quality player on the ball. But I definitely I think he's a couple $100K overpriced at this point, and I do sympathize with him because he's had an up and down season based on availability and injuries and trying to stay healthy in the lineup. He's had an up and down season based on who he's playing with down that left wing. He hasn't been able to form that consistent relationship with Lorenzo Insigne. So I do sympathize with him a little bit. I think there's a lot more that he can give at left back, but right now I think it's quite clear that he isn't worth his price tag.
Not even close.
I do wonder though if he's a guy that TFC do want to keep around because he's got a good head on his shoulders too, from my understanding with everything. It seems like he's a guy that adds value to this team in a lot of different ways besides just what we're seeing. Still though, I think you need to get more from him in order to justify kind of paying him that amount for sure. Last thing. Just want to touch on quickly. You've mentioned it. Victor Vasquez returning, formed a really immediate relationship in the midfield with Alonso Coelho and Jonathan Osorio. People love Vasquez's game last night. I was here and there. There was one really bad giveaway that he had actually led to an Opoku breakaway.
Yep, I remember.
He might have had maybe 15, 20 touches on the ball in the last 10 minutes that he came on. Love seeing Victor Vasquez on the pitch, don't get me wrong, but he needs minutes. Like it's been so long since he's played. I think he just needs minutes to get under his belt. But I did like what I saw when he did connect at times with Alonso Coelho and Jonathan Osorio in that midfield. And as you mentioned, he did play a role in Bernadeschi's final goal there. So glad to have him back. We'll see exactly what role he plays here down the stretch for TFC because, and I've said this, and I'm not shying away from it, I still think he could be a valuable piece to a roster as a veteran depth piece if he can stay healthy and if he can stay available. So these next 9 matches or so, I think will be a bit of an audition for him almost heading into the new season. And like I was alluding to with Petretta, this guy's, I mean, we all know this. He's an unbelievable character to add to this team off the pitch. He's taken Alonso Coelho under his wing. Those two guys have actually become really good friends off the field.
Thank God.
And
I love it. You love to see
he's
it.
serving right now as a real mentor right now for Alonso Coelho. And that's a guy who, as we just talked about, is kind of flourishing on his own right now in the midfield. So having Victor Vasquez there as that connection with him for both on the field and off the field, that Spanish connection, like that is money and so important. So
it's so
again,
so important.
there's
So,
30 roster spots on an MLS side. I think you can find a way to squeeze Victor Vasquez into one of those roster spots at, again, a really, really low cost on that salary budget. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out, though. Final thing on this game, just quickly touch on it. Thomas Romero, not his best outing.
Nope.
One of the things that's glaringly obvious about Thomas Romero is he is a bit of he's a shorter goalie than
He is, yeah.
maybe
He's not
goalies that we've become used to here. Obviously, his distribution last night was not great. Shot stopping last night wasn't the best, although some of the chances were tougher chances. He had such a positive start against St. Louis City, and I think this is just something we have to give time to. We can't really judge him off just the one performance, but I think we can all agree it wasn't his best performance, and he's got more in the tank there.
I agree. It really wasn't, but shorter goalkeepers are like spider monkeys, and when they're on, they're so much fun to watch. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He can't be any worse than Renjik Singh was. So let's just roll with Romero for a while.
Yeah, that is true. All right, let's move on here. So as I mentioned off the top of the show, one of the things I've been kind of wondering, and at times wondering out loud, is whether or not, Jeff, big picture, what is there left to salvage for Toronto FC over these last 9 games? And the reason being is I've seen this narrative kind of going around, and I've seen it at a couple different places. And obviously someone I interacted with on Twitter, I forget the account, but one of the TFC accounts I interacted with on Twitter last night was suggesting that we've been too soft on Terry Dunfield and that Toronto FC should fire Terry Dunfield. What do you think about that? I'm curious about your thoughts about whether or not you think we should sack Terry Dunfield here.
There was a tweet that I included in my WTR article, and I actually retweeted.
I read that
because I really wanted the discussion, and it was okay. We had 3 weeks of downtime to rest and reset, and then we came out that flat. Is it time to start pointing fingers at Terry Dunfield? And I think within the scope of that question, it's a fair question. Like, what were they doing over the 3 weeks? Were they just out eating chicken wings, talking about their feelings? Because maybe there's something there, but that they almost looked worse than before the 3 week break coming out there, and it was bracing. I think the second half made a lot of forgiveness for that. But I can't do it, because this, you want to talk about poison chalices, and you want to talk about a no-win situation. You got Dunfield in his hoodie in the Webster soccer dictionary, just with a frown on his face, and that's the whole entry of poison chalice, no-win situation. I think we don't know what he's doing behind the scenes. We don't know what kind of mess he's dealing with, what kind of egos he's dealing with. We don't know how much power he has over the goings on, or whether it's coaching by committee at this point. So laying the finger on Terry and saying it's all Terry's fault, when it's so clear that he's a mouthpiece for the organization. He's been put in this very unenviable position, as a stopgap that even he wasn't prepared to. He was ready for the 4 games, and now it's way longer than that, So I don't think it's fair, but I did think it was an interesting wrinkle to the dialogue. Yeah, I'll let you reset.
Yeah. So, and maybe this is going to come across as a bit harsh. So if anyone gets offended by this, I apologize, but I think it's such a stupid take. I think it's so silly for anyone to suggest firing Terry Dunfield at this point is going to change anything
We're not
for
making the
Toronto FC's
playoffs.
season.
We're not getting in. We're not winning MLS Cup.
Mhm.
Like it's yeah.
Well, yeah, that, and also, if you were to say Terry Dunfield was the wrong guy to appoint at the time of the interim manager, I would be like, okay, you know what? How do you argue
Who
that?
yeah.
How do you disagree with that Terry Dunfield would be the wrong guy to hire based on the results that we've seen from Toronto FC, right? They've scored 2 goals over his 7-game span here. They haven't won a match. There's nothing to justify right now from the outside looking in that Terry Dunfield is the guy for this team moving forward. But that being said, we knew it at the time. We've talked about it. We've talked about this throughout his tenure here. Terry Dunfield is a guy that's kind of just falling on the sword right now. He's going through a
100%
roster
with a
change.
smile on his face.
Yeah, and he's got people that have been shipped out from this side. He's had to deal with the drama that's gone around with Insigne and Bernadeschi. He's had to deal with the fact he hasn't had those players available. It's not like the interim manager right now is the most appealing job. So for people to suggest firing Terry Dunfield at this point with 9 games remaining in the season is actually a good course of action, to me, is so silly because it means you're missing the bigger picture in Toronto FC. Unless TFC are hiring their next permanent manager at this point in time, there's no point in hiring another interim manager unless you're just looking for marginal improvements for this Toronto FC team the rest of the season. And I got to break it to you. I hate to break it to you for anyone who hasn't realized it yet. This season, it's a write-off. It doesn't matter. Half of the guys that are on this team right now,
aren't
are
coming
not
back.
going to be here. And they're going to play in a completely new system when their new manager arrives. So for anyone to suggest right now that
Mike,
Terry Dunfield,
we're in a salary cap league. We're already paying. Forget about MLSE paying out who was the name of the hockey coach, Babcock. Forget about MLSE having to foot Babcock's remaining contract. We're still paying Bob Bradley and his staff. You know, why the hell would we be spending money on Terry Dunfield in all but name? Right? There's no saving this season. The idea that the incoming coach is going to see what he has is not worth the cost outlay. You know, it's just not. It's just not.
And I get the frustration, Jeff. I get the frustration.
I get the frustration too. I get the frustration too.
The results haven't been there right now with Terry, so I get it, and I get coming off a long break and you're facing a rival at home and they come out flat. So I get the frustration. It's just, if you think big picture here, and I think we've learned this, is that the coach is not the biggest issue at this football club right now. There are way bigger issues. So, the first thing fans do when things aren't going right, fire this guy, fire this guy, fire this guy. And most of the times it's usually the coach. So I get the frustration. I just think you got to take a step back and you have to look at the bigger picture here when you talk about solutions here for this TFC team moving forward. But speaking of solutions, Jeff, just shifting gears quickly.
Hold on. A bit of 1 second, because I don't want to drag Bartage, but I hate this comment. What's really scary is that somehow Dunfield has been coaching our youth teams. The old boy club has to stop. We need wholesale change to structure this management team. Terry Dunfield may not be a good first team coach, but everything that we don't like about him on the first team makes him a perfect academy coach for young players. His light touch, his unwillingness to speak out of turn, his sort of human humility, kumbaya, let's all have orange slices. That's maybe not the best approach in ultra competitive first team Major League Soccer, regardless of whether or not we have promotion and relegation. But those are all strengths for an academy coach, right? You're talking about the difference between a university professor and the guy running your daycare. And I don't want to belittle Terry Dunfield to that level by comparing him to a daycare coach, but his skill set and his experience is doing that. So, you're going to rest on your strengths.
He was also really successful. He was also a really successful U17 coach, which is why he got promoted. The record speaks for itself for
Exactly.
Terry Dunfield as an
His record
academy coach.
speaks
So
for itself.
anyone,
Agreed. This kid glove approach with the first team. I would hazard to say that if he had been hired for this job and not been handed a poison chalice, he would probably come out of the gate a bit more screaming hot than he is right now. But he's leaning on what works, like the team is leaning on what works. So you can't fault him for going for his what's worked before. Anyway, that's as much as I'll say on that. And sorry, I didn't want to drag any of our listeners, and I'm not really dragging you. That perspective makes me kind of mad because first team is very different than academy teams.
yeah, obviously different roles. And I think, again, a lot of the frustration also stems from the fact that Bill Manning alluded to the fact that Terry Dunfield would only be the head coach for about 4 matches, and they wanted their head coach in before Leagues Cup. But a lot has gone on behind the scenes, which is why this process has maybe taken a bit longer than the club hoped, that fans hope, that everybody overall has hoped for this Toronto FC team. So, on that note, let's jump ahead here to this week's burning question presented by Nesker. Question presented by Nextdoor. Nextdoor is the official community app of Toronto FC. It's used by 1 in 5 households in the GTA. The Nextdoor app is an awesome way to get things done in your neighborhood. We're posting clips, contest details, and other goodies on the Toronto FC fan group, so make sure you check it out. To join the group, download the app now in the App Store or get it at nextdoor.ca. So
that was a hell of a cold read.
So this week's question that we threw out there, I'm just gonna say it's perfect timing. We asked fans how they would feel if Toronto FC hired Canadian men's national team head coach John Herdman as the club's next manager. And the reason we say perfect timing, which of course, unless you've been living under a rock, you would have heard by now, but Joshua Cloak reporting that John Herdman was a candidate for the Toronto FC coaching position.
He's now the front runner.
Yeah, and then today with Tom Bogert reporting. Tom Bogert, by the way, was on our show 2 weeks ago, so make sure you guys check that out if you haven't. But
such a
Josh
good episode.
Cloak
Sorry to miss
reporting. Yeah, Josh Cloak reporting with Tom Bogert that John Herdman is now the front runner in Toronto FC's coaching search to become the next, I guess, club's head coach. So Adam Gillick on the Toronto FC fans Nextdoor group here is saying he has a mixed opinion. On one hand, he's led the Canadian men's national team to the highest point they've ever been in, but he's also very unproven in the club game. I'd be worried his skill set wouldn't be able to transfer over easily. And I think that's kind of the sentiment that we've been seeing a lot here as we go to Twitter, and Luca Accardi is saying, we don't need another motivator. We need a tactically proficient manager. I am once again asking to bring back Javier Perez. I've seen that a lot. Greg Finley saying could work if John Herdman has significant input on the roster. If he doesn't, then probably not the right choice. Whoever coaches this team next year is going to need patience to rebuild the team. And I think Greg is actually spot on with his sentiment there, because in the Athletic today, in that article, one of the things, an interesting tidbit was that Bill Manning wants his next head coach to be able to overturn the roster. That is one of the reports that's out there. So John Herdman, hypothetically, if he is the guy that ends up being appointed here for Toronto FC, it sounds like he's going to have a big input here to help overturn and really kind of make up this roster here. Our friend Corey Brady, friend of the show here, saying Herdman is a better national team manager. He's been great for Canada with both national teams. I think that's an important point. He's never managed at the club level, though. TFC needs a coach
the ultimate point, yeah.
Yeah, TFC needs a coach who is familiar with MLS and the demands of the league, is experienced coaching players at various levels, is connected to the international soccer scene, and is familiar with the Canadian soccer landscape and tapping into the domestic player pool. And he says, goes on to say, Pamadou Ka fits this description perfectly. Obviously, the former Pacific FC head coach, and he also spent some time with the USL side. I think Dallas's USL team.
MLX
What?
Nest Pro, I think. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, and the next pro team.
Yeah.
So what I can tell people is actually Pamadou Ka was interviewed for the Toronto FC coaching position. So
Nice.
we know we've seen the Bobby Smirniotis reports. I'm not sure if this is out there publicly yet, but Pamadou Ka was another name that Toronto FC did inquire about and is in the running to become the next TFC head coach. Nicholas Richard, he's saying it would really matter who his assistant coach is. Speaking about John Herdman, I like John Herdman for his motivational skills, but his tactical and technical has been a little wanting. And then lastly,
it's going to be Neville. It's going to be Gary Neville, and it's going to suck. So
Phil Neville.
No. Oh yeah, right. Sorry.
And then Kurt McGurts is saying it makes him nervous that he's never managed a club. But I think if we have enough patience, in brackets, yeah, right, he may work out. That seems to be the sentiment. So Jeff, let me throw it to you. John Herdman, do you trust him to be able to coach a club like Toronto FC, and why not?
Because he has no club experience. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep these PR shiny hires unproven. If we've interviewed he's a way better choice. He's managed in the club game before. And he deserves a step up to MLS. I'd much rather take a chance on Pamadou Ka than John Herdman. Forget about what it does to the Canadian men's national team heading into World Cup 2026, because so much bad is going to happen in the next little while that it really doesn't matter who's the gaffer behind the helm. It's just I can't. He got found out for his technical deficiencies in 3 games at the World Cup. Now, obviously, different environment, but though, haven't we suffered enough, man? Like, wasn't the false dawn of Bob Bradley enough of a soul crushing exercise? And now we're going to do it with Herdman too. I want to say for bet, and I have no doubt that he'll be motivated to learn from his deficiencies. And one of my favorite things about John Herdman is he rarely makes the same mistake twice. But God damn it, not on our watch, not on my watch. Can he find another place to make his mistakes than TFC at maybe its lowest point in franchise history? Like, I want as close to a sure thing as possible, and this ain't it. I know. I think Bob Bradley was as close to a sure thing as possible, and look at how that worked out. So I don't know. You're right. I don't know, but I don't like it. On knee jerk, I don't like it. I really don't like it.
I don't know, man. I don't know, because I think when I've seen the response to John Herdman, it's been fairly negative, which honestly I find a little bit surprising. Now, I understand why there's question marks about Herdman tactically, but I also think it's become a narrative that is a little bit overblown.
No, really?
He's
of course it
it wasn't that long ago where he was the guy to shift Canada into that back 3 and start to get the best out of Alistair Johnston and start to get the best out of Kamal Miller and really unlock guys like Alphonso Davies and Tajon Buchanan going forward. There are times where we wondered what Davies' best position was going to be, and ultimately he's really settled into this kind of wing back role with Canada, or even a more advanced role now with Sam Adekugbe, being able to play as that left back as well. Like Herdman, I'm not saying he's a tactical genius, and I do think there are question marks about him tactically. But for people to say that he just doesn't tactically have it, I think, again, it's a little bit overblown and a little bit harsh. I still think there's a lot that goes in behind the scenes in terms of his tactics. But I think even today, the Athletic reported that players have question marks about Herdman tactically. So maybe there is, something more there that I'm not seeing. The other thing, though, is as much as people might not want to realize it or don't realize it or may not want to admit it, TFC is now a massive project again, where they're starting from ground zero.
I'm so glad that you said it. Yeah.
As Bill Manning said, this new manager is going to have to kind of go through an overhaul. And Herman is a culture setter. Like there's a lot that he's been dealing with Canada soccer, like a lot that he's been
I
dealing with
know.
beyond just
Yeah.
being the head coach of the Canadian men's national team. He's going door to door, knocking door to door to try to get sponsorship money. He's dealing with everything
Yeah.
else that we've read and is going on behind the scenes. And yeah, sure, he's an unbelievable motivator. And in a way, this team desperately needs
Needs
that right now.
motivation. Yeah. You're making a very
Well, they
good
need
argument. You're making
they
a
need a
very,
culture
very, very good
setter
argument.
and a guy that can really start a new era for Toronto FC. And John Herdman fits that bill in so many different ways. Another candidate that was out there, and it's been talked about a little bit, Mark Warburton. He was, of course, most recently a first team coach at West Ham, but he's also had experience coaching or managing, Rangers. He's had experience also with Brentford. He's had experience with Nottingham Forest. He's had experience with QPR. So an experienced manager overseas, coached some really big clubs, and TFC did have serious discussions with Mark Warburton. And I can even go on and add that TFC got to the point where I believe they wanted to make Mark Warburton an offer to become the next head coach of Toronto FC. But and I think it's been reported that the board shut down Warburton, but I believe actually Warburton turned down Toronto FC. That is my understanding of it. Regardless, I think the Athletic today still listed him as a candidate, and not to kind of refute their reporting because they probably are more right than I am. But just what I've heard is that that ship has sailed when it comes to Mark Warburton. So not a guy that I think TFC kind of have in their sights anymore, but was a guy that would have been a really interesting hire for TFC.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as we talk about it here, the coaching search, the question has now become whether or not TFC make their hire during these last 9 games, or if they wait until the end of the season to make their hire. Again, another tidbit in that article by Josh Cloak and Tom Bogert is that the board is kind of debating whether or not they should make the hire now or whether or not they should make it at the end of the season. So let's just play just a game here, Jeff. Not really a game, but just let me throw the question out to you. Let's say hypothetically TFC had made their decision. They've agreed to terms with their new manager. Hypothetically, it's John Herdman. Would you bring John Herdman in now, start him tomorrow, let's say, or would you wait until the end of the season, give him that fresh slate, that time to dissect the roster, that time to get to know everybody, and get to start fresh, I guess, a new season here with Toronto FC?
I don't know. I think it's up to if the ink is dried on your paycheck and you work as the gaffer for TFC, wouldn't you want to get started as early as possible? I can't think of a single manager that I would want working at the club that wouldn't want to be there in the trenches. Public opinion be damned. I think most gaffers don't really care about the fickle finger of public opinion. Or at least not as much as we fans think they do. So yeah, maybe Herdman has to wear a couple more L's and get the ire of people that are like, well, he didn't fix everything, so throw him, douse him in gasoline. To me, it's a no-brainer. If he's if it's Herdman or Pamu Daga, please, or any of these other people, I think they would want to come in. We're not Man U. Like, we don't have what's his face before Ter Hag, the Red Bull guy that was like a consulting manager.
Ralph
for a while.
Rangnick?
I can't remember. Yeah. Like, we're not that club. So I just think, if it is Herdman in this thought exercise, I can't see him sitting on the sidelines, shaking hands, kissing babies, getting to know Rita at ticket sales, right? Like, I think he'd want to be out there and forget, not like let the record stand, right? So. Yeah. And I just can't see
what's your answer?
that they would want to be out there. as gaffer, not in
So
the sidelines.
is that what you would want?
Yeah.
You would want?
If
If
it
you
was me,
were
100%.
hypothetically in charge of TFC, yeah, you'd want them out tomorrow.
100%. The second the ink dries on my contract, I start making decisions, because why get comfortable doing what you're not doing? Why get comfortable going in 9 to 5, sitting around playing Candy Crush because you've got nothing to do? Like, I would want to instill my perspective. I would want to get my flag and footprint planted as early as possible. And the only way to do that is by assuming the responsibility, right? There is no halvesies, right? Like if my contract is signed, I don't want to be half in the door. I want to be fully in the door as soon as that ink is dried. So
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think for Toronto FC, if in a perfect world you get Herdman, and if it's Herdman, you get your new manager in as quickly as possible, just because it gives them more time to kind of understand the ins and outs of the teams, and understand from a first person perspective exactly who wants to stay and who wants to go. Right? Exactly. As Serge McGirt saying, start to learn the players as much as possible in the matches.
as much as possible.
The argument for waiting is, giving the manager a clean slate and a manager the time to learn the ins and outs of the club, not on the fly. Because the reality is, if you do insert a manager halfway through, not even halfway through, with 9 games left in the season here, you are doing the job on the fly instead of kind of taking time
but
to...
the only people that are going to be upset about it are the people that were unrealistic in the first place, that expected major changes to happen, that we would pull a Leagues Cup and immediately, win MLS Cup, right? That ain't happening. So as long as we're realistic about the season's lost, and whether it's Terry at the helm or Herdman at the helm, there's not going to be much to love about it. It just is what it is. And so as long as we're realistic about that, and we won't be, but as long as there are people realistic about that, I don't see any issue. And like I said, you don't take the job to sit on the sidelines. So the second you take the job, it's your job. The buck stops with you. I would hate to. I think it would be a war crime if I took the job and I let Terry stay in the gaffer's seat, just getting pelted with vegetables by the TFC fandom when he didn't have to. I think that's a horrible thing to do to the man. So I would want to get in there as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Just saying here in the chat, what's going on with Paul Stalteri? So Paul Stalteri, John Molinaro was the one to report this, and what my understanding of it is that he's still on Toronto FC's payroll, and the club is making a decision here whether or not, when they do appoint their new manager, what kind of role Paul Stalteri can play with the club. And it may not be an assistant coaching role. It could be beyond an assistant coaching role. But at this time, he's not part of Terry Dunfield's coaching staff. So his future still could be with Toronto FC, but that's going to be something that we have to wait on and hear more about. But TFC still value Paul Stalteri, and the club's still on good terms with Paul, obviously a Canadian icon. But speaking of Canadian icon, Gray's asking here, do we know more about D-Rose's involvement? Not beyond what I reported on Friday. Dwayne Di Rosario, for the past 3 weeks, if you missed it, he's been working with TFC's strikers. He's been doing that in training. So technically, part of TFC's technical coaching staff yesterday. There was no agreement beyond yesterday. But I wouldn't be surprised that as long as Terry Dunfield remains in the driver's seat here, that D-Row, who is his good friend, of course, stays on and helps TFC's strikers the rest of the way, as long as Terry Dunfield's in the mix. When he's not, it might be something the club reevaluates, because obviously the new coach wants to bring in their own staff here. But it's been cool, at least, to see D-Row be involved with the club, because we know the mark that he has left on.
Nobody knows MLS like a guy who hasn't put on his boots since 2014. Knows the league like crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever.
I saw people run with that. It's,
yeah.
I thought it's a bit overblown.
Turts really wants us to talk about Seba before we go. Turts.
Oh yeah.
If it's 125K in Garber bucks that disappear in 2024, sign the man. Sign the man. Why not? Let him lace up the boots. Give him the send off he doesn't deserve, because he left us in such dire straits. But everybody likes a happy ending. I'm completely okay with it. Why not? Why not? Like just so that we never ever talk about it again. Get him there. Give him his flowers. Get him out. Done.
Yeah,
Check it off
that's
the
kind of
list.
where I fall. I'm like, what do we have to lose the rest of the season? I think it'd be a nice way
we got nothing to
to
lose.
send off Sebastian Giovinco. And hey, if odds are against him, but if hypothetically, if Sebastian Giovinco all of a sudden shows that he can still hang in Major League Soccer, I mean, look, this is a guy who was literally the best player to, I think, ever play for Major League Soccer until Lionel Messi joined. But let's just still
Carlos
keep
Vela
his
kind of shredded. And Joseph Martinez and Carlos Vela would like a word, but yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I
agree.
still think
I think
Seba in his prime. I would take him.
In his prime, unbelievable player. But the league has changed, and he's changed. And Father Time, no one can escape Father Time. If he wants to put his reputation on the fire, if he wants to ante up his reputation as a world beater, to come back and huff and puff his way through 20 garbage minutes here or there for a league minimum in Garber bucks that we aren't getting back, who cares, man? Let him have it. Maybe he just really loves the new kit and wants to wear it. So, let's just go.
Yeah,
let's go.
I've seen some people make the argument. So this is the argument against Seba. One of the things people say is that it's going to be taking minutes away from some of the younger players. For me, like the last 8 games of the season, that's not a major concern because Sebastian Giovinco is not going to be starting matches. He's going to be coming off the bench. He's going to be playing the last 10 minutes of matches, hypothetically, or roughly around there. And he's a guy that could be a good role model for younger players at this point in his career. I do think there is some value in that as well. The other thing
100%.
people are making is that this could kind of taint Seba's legacy. If
it might,
whatever these, will it?
If he sucks out there, it's really going to put a frown on the faces of people that still think he's awesome, unrealistically. And like it's going to be in shock. If he is huffing and puffing out there like his age suggests, it's going to be a very difficult situation for people that are slagging Michael Bradley for losing his pace and then watching, the atomic ant just eat it out there. So we'll see. We'll see. But like I said,
if it was 2 seasons worth, Jeff, I'd agree with you. If it's 8 or 9 games of cameo appearances off the bench, no one's gonna question his legacy.
You know what? You're right. You're right. All the more reason to just do it already. You're right. Just do it. Just do it already.
And I get it. Some people are at the point where like, let's just do it so people like us can just shut up about it.
Just shut up about it. I'm so sick of talking about it. Just do it already. Honestly, just do it already.
I get it. Last thing, like I said, I went to the game as a fan last night, so it was really fun seeing a lot of fans and and interacting with a lot of fans, even going up from CNE, talking to a lot of people about
how many people told you that you should get me off the show immediately. Was it 99%?
I get a couple of those a day, Jeff. Zhao, why you gotta call me out like this, man? Come on. He's asking why I left in the 79th minute last night. So that was right after the red card and the penalty. Now, I gotta say, I'm gonna throw my friends and my girlfriend on the bus. It was hard for them to resist the urge of getting a deep fried Mars bar outside at the CNE or staying and watching the rest of that game with TFC at 10 men. Me personally, guys, you already know, I'm there. I'm staying till,
of course,
95th minute. I'm staying till the players walk out. I mean, I'm there every game to do post-game pressers and stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't leave until 1 in the morning. He lives at BMO. Like, he's the last person that's leaving early. No, I'm team Mikey Singh. This Zhao guy's he's trying to throw you under the bus. And this is despite the fact that you put me on blast for the James Sharman text message where he revealed the extent of my injuries. And trust me, I owe Sharman putting him on blast as well. But anyway,
no, Zhao, no,
that's that.
Zhao's jokes. That's he caught me, man. I gotta own up to it. I did leave the game early last night, but like I said, it was tough to resist the call of the CNE. And
it's because of Zhao wanted his deep fried Mars bar. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's another jam-packed episode. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all of your comments. I tried to get to as many as them as I could, but you guys know where to find us. We'll be back at the same time next week. We'll be teeing up recapping, I think, the Columbus match. By the way, Columbus 3-0 thrashing
I
of
know.
FC
Hell
Cincinnati,
is
the league
real.
leaders. I mean, Columbus, they lost Lucas Zelleran, but they brought in Diego Rossi. You see Jason Russell Rowe lighting up for them. Aiden Morris, who at one point was a possible Canadian national team
Mm-hmm.
player, but of course he's committed now to the United States. So they've got a really fun team going on there. Tim Bezbachenko,
And a hell of a
longtime
coach.
table for
Hell of a
Nazi.
coach.
Oh yeah. So TFC's on the road at lower.com field Saturday night. Our Saturday nights are back. It was nice to have a little bit break, but we know where to find us on Saturday nights. Before we go, big favor to ask. As always, please guys, spread the news about the show. Mike Newell said this. I'm just going to echo this. We're going at a really fast rate. And even though times are tough right now, times are hard. The viewership and you guys engage so nicely with us. We get so much engagement. So we thank you guys as a loyal watcher or listener. If you guys are listening this back on the podcast, so do us a favor. Just please share the love with your TFC loving friends and find us and subscribe / follow, I guess, for us on all of the platforms. So we're on YouTube Live. So please do us a favor, hit that little subscription button, hit that little bell. You'll know that when we go live. Usually it's on Monday nights, and we'll be back Monday night next week. Follow us on Twitter. We're growing there pretty quickly as well. And then, of course, do us a huge favor if you're listening back to this on the podcast. Please leave a 5-star review. Make sure you subscribe to the pod. It does
join the Nesker group.
That's really well. And yeah, of course, join the Toronto FC fan group on Nextdoor to get even more TTID content. But for now, for myself and Jeffrey P. Nesker, for Mike Newell, who is chilling by a fire pit right now, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
And wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.